Hi there, my name is Sherry Forsyth. I'm a peak performance and bereavement coach, and my topic today is self-compassion. I'm going to be speaking to you about Dr. Kristin Neff's ideas about self-compassion. But just to say at the beginning, self-compassion is so central to many of the things that we've spoken about before on our videos. Things like not feeling good enough, low self-esteem, low self-worth, perfectionism, and in fact there's a school of thought that says that if you have low self-esteem, the best antidote to that is treating yourself with self-compassion. But more about that in another video. Let's move on to Dr. Kristin Neff. She is at the cutting edge of research on self-compassion. When I think of self-compassion, I think of Dr. Kristin Neff. She's absolutely amazing. She's the leading researcher on this topic, and she received her doctorate from the University of California in Berkeley. She then did postdoctoral studies at the University of Denver, and currently she's an associate professor at the University of Texas in Austin. She has written some books as well. The most important one is called Self-Compassion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. And her latest book, which was written in 2018, is a workbook on how you can go about treating yourself with self-compassion. Dr. Kristin Neff also has many TED Talks and videos. If you go onto YouTube and just plug in her name, all the videos will come up. She is really, really amazing in the information she gives us on self-compassion. I think also what makes her, for me, far more real is that she has an autistic child herself. So she's not only talking about things academically, she's living it every day. And that, for me, always carries a lot of weight. Okay, so what does Dr. Kristin Neff say about self-compassion? The first thing we need to recognize is that we are suffering, and then we can treat ourselves with self-compassion. That may sound a bit weird. I mean, obviously, if people are in pain, they must know that they're suffering from it. But actually, in our society, where we suppress so much emotion, it's not a given that you will know that you are in pain or suffering. So it sounds like a very obvious step, but for some people it's not so obvious. So we need to recognize we are suffering, and then we can apply self-compassion. As Kristin says, we can't heal what we don't feel. Okay, I think that's really important. We can't heal what we don't feel. Self-compassion also is about self-acceptance, exactly who I am as I am right now. Okay, so does this mean that we can get complacent and just sit back and say, well, I'm treating myself with self-compassion. This is me. This is what I can give you, and you have to accept me warts and all. No, we do need to say, this is who I am right now, but we always can leave room for more improvement. So it doesn't mean that we can just sit back and inflict ourselves on the world without trying to improve and better ourselves. So we can treat ourselves with self-compassion, and at the same time we can be striving to be better. Self-compassion also doesn't judge. Okay? We must be aware of our wrongs, but not take them to the place where we are beating ourselves up on and on and on. Okay, we want to be healthy. We want to be real about what's happening in our lives. But with that, we don't want to overjudge, if there is such a term. The next thing about self-compassion is that we must be careful that we don't just award ourselves short-term pleasurable activities that are not good for us in the long term. That is not treating yourself with self-compassion. So, for example, if I feel that I am in a really bad place and I need to increase my serotonin levels, and therefore I'm going to eat lots of chocolate, or let's say a nice big fat slice of chocolate cake, and I'm going to do that 3 times a day, and I'm going to do that for a month, long term, that's not going to be good for me. It's not going to be good for my body. So we need to be aware of what we can do to treat ourselves with self-compassion. And that is going to be the topic of the next video. So we need to realize that with self-compassion, we're wanting to be encouraging and motivating to ourselves rather than going into the default mode, which we all have, of just beating ourselves up, self-criticism, self-talk. I think you get what I'm saying. So the research has shown that self-criticism doesn't actually work, but self-compassion does. So why is this so? Well, think of yourself. If you are criticized by someone else, are you going to be motivated to do better? Are you going to be motivated to improve? Probably not. In fact, if we are criticized, we generally feel quite deflated. We feel useless. We feel we can't do things. And in its worst case, it can lead to depression as well. So that's the same with self-criticism. We will have those same results. Okay? Whereas if you treat yourself with compassion, what you're going to do is you're wanting to encourage yourself to do better. You understand you've made a mistake, but instead of doing the self-criticism, you're going to encourage yourself. Next time you'll do better. Next time you will have learned your lesson, and you will therefore be able to improve. So we accept that we're making mistakes, we learn from them, and we encourage ourselves to do better each time. So that is why we need to choose the self-compassion over self-criticism. I hope that makes sense to you. So Dr. Kristin Neff identifies 3 components of self-compassion, which I'm very briefly going to discuss now. So the first one is, the first component of self-compassion is self-kindness as opposed to self-judgment. Okay? So in self-compassion, we need to be warm and understanding and caring and nurturing when we are going through a hard time, when we have failed at something, when we feel that we are at our worst. So most of the time what we do is we ignore that pain, we pretend it's not there, and we beat ourselves up royally. Okay? Instead of recognizing that we are suffering, we have failed, we are imperfect, and instead we're going to encourage ourselves to try another time. We're going to try something different. I like to compare it with a parent who is encouraging their child when they're learning to walk. You know, we're not going to bat them down all the time. We're going to say, come, my darling, you know, let's try again. You did so well last time. And that's exactly the attitude that we're wanting towards ourselves, to treat ourselves with self-compassion. Imagine a friend being in a similar situation to you. How would we treat them? And it probably would be with encouragement, with nurturing, with support. So we need to do exactly the same to ourselves. Okay, so the first component of self-compassion is self-kindness rather than self-judgment. We're not going to self-criticize. We know that it doesn't work. Okay, the second component of self-compassion is embracing common humanity as opposed to being isolated. In other words, we are part of the whole. We are not alone in suffering. We are not alone in making mistakes. We are not alone in having to deal with pain. It is part of the human condition. So very often when we have failed, we do think we're the only ones. We're very isolated. We feel very isolated. But in fact, if we can just know deep down that this happens to everybody, everybody will make a mistake. Everybody will fail in something. And therefore, I am part of everybody. I'm part of the people who may be failing. So part of being human is to fail, to learn, to suffer. And instead of beating ourselves up about it, what we're going to do is we're going to realize it's part of embracing our humanity. Does that make sense? So you're not alone. And the third component of self-compassion, according to Dr. Kristin Neff, is mindfulness, as opposed to over-identification or actually overreaction. So mindfulness refers to, and I'm quoting her here, clear seeing and a non-judgmental acceptance of what's occurring in the present moment. In other words, mindfulness means we see reality as it really is. We recognize it, we're aware of it. And we are not trying then to change our current situation. First step is just to becoming aware of it. And then we need to have a balanced approach between the emotions that are likely to result. And that's where mindfulness comes in as a practice. What it does is it kind of balances out our emotions. There's a word called equilibrating our emotions, and that's really what mindfulness helps us to do. So mindfulness is a non-judgmental, receptive state that will just observe our thoughts and feelings in a calm way without overreacting emotionally. Okay, so in conclusion, Dr. Kristin Neff is your go-to person, and that's spelled Kristin, and her surname is Neff. Okay, Dr. Kristin Neff is your go-to person for self-compassion. The important things we need to take from today's video is self-criticism does not work. We are breaking ourselves down, and we need to be building ourselves up. Okay, so self-compassion works because we're going to be building ourselves up. And the three components from that Dr. Kristin Neff has identified are self-kindness is the first one. The second one is being part of a common humanity. And the last one is mindfulness. So I hope you found this video to be helpful for you. If you are wanting to find out how to actually practice self-compassion, my video next week is going to be on tips to help you incorporate that into your daily life. So as always from me, I thank you for your very valuable time, and I look forward to chatting to you again next week.